Hi guys, welcome back to The Vegan View. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, celebrity makeup artist, Jared Lipscomb. He also has his very own podcast called Back on Air with Jared. We're going to make sure to link it below so you guys can check it out. He's here with us today to talk to us about his journey to veganism.
And I think you know him.
I forgot to mention he's also my real life BFF, and we FaceTime about 75 times a day. Nice. But I was trying to play it cool.
This guy I just met.
It turns out we know each other in real life and are best friends. Well, thanks for having me, ladies.
Thank you so much.
I'm so excited to be part of the Vegan View finally.
We're so excited.
God.
So excited to have you. So tell us a little bit about yourself and just your journey to veganism.
Oh my God, where do we even begin? I mean, I know exactly where to begin. So my journey to veganism was pretty straightforward. And it started with a kind of a tragedy, almost tragedy in my life, which was a leukemia diagnosis 2 years ago. And at the time I was not vegan. Obviously I was best friends with MALINA, so I knew about the world of veganism. And I always joke that I had like the soul of a vegan now in hindsight. And in retrospect, you know, like I would swerve and rather crash my own car than hit a squirrel in the road. Mm-hmm. And I would go to the little animal places in Florida, the swamps, and I was always drawn to the rescue centers as opposed to the zoos. So I feel like it was always, part of me wanting to help animals and this kind of mindset. But then you have this thing when you grow up in the South, you don't, it's just a different mythos of how cooking is done in the South. And I just did not have the critical thinking skills really to put two and two together with like, oh, veganism, not harming these animals that I'm so desperate to want to help at all times. Anyway, so I just didn't really think about it for a long time. It was just kind of one of those things. I would make these ethical decisions with my makeup. So I would be doing active things like buying cruelty-free makeup and trying to use these cruelty-free and ethical products, but I would still eat a hamburger. So I just didn't have that thinking wasn't in place. And fast forward to my leukemia diagnosis 2 years ago. And, to be cured from leukemia, you have to rely on a lot of science. And I was saved by a bone marrow transplant, which sounds like some foreign crazy thing. And, it's actually a blood draw done by a donor. And it saved my life. Wow. And so, it's really amazing. Someone stepped up and just donated blood, and it ended up curing my cancer. And the craziest part about all of this is as I'm starting to recover and learning about what's next and how do I get better and how do I get my life back on track, I speak to one of my doctors and she just casually mentions, oh, and you should kind of do more plant-based. And I was just kind of like, what'd you say? Sorry, what was that? Because obviously, as doctors are not meant to sway you one way or the other. They want it to be everything is your decision, in the medical field. Even my choice to get chemo was my choice. Which to me, it was like, obviously I was like, what's the other option? There are no other options. So of course I'm going to take chemo. But it was so interesting that the doctor threw this like kind of plant-based, just real quickly, she just said, we recommend eating, less red meat, just kind of the normal stuff. But then she's like, you could go plant-based too. And I was just like, oh, this is someone who is scientifically saving my life. Mm-hmm. This isn't another person in my DMs. And let me just be honest with you. I did have some loonies in my DMs. When you're a makeup artist to celebrities, you get a lot of, people who want to connect with the celebrities you work with. Mm-hmm. And they also want to just kind of get their way in. I mean, I had one woman DMing me for probably 6 months of my treatment saying I need to drink celery juice and do a vegan juice cleanse because it helped shrink the tumor in her friend's brain, and it just had nothing to do with my cancer. And so the thing was, it didn't, not to say you can't come into veganism any which way you want to, but for me, after experiencing this scientific breakthrough where they were able to save my life, and then to have that very same person say, hey, if you want to live even longer and stay healthier, this might be the way to explore it. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's all the evidence I need. I've already have the heart for it. We've already band SeaWorld together. I've already done so many like pro-vegan events besides the actual part of being like, okay, now I need to stop, eating dead animals. And it was a pretty seamless journey. The one good thing about cancer, if you can, you got to find the silver lining in everything. And the one good thing was I didn't crave as much stuff and my cravings changed. So I was able to kind of start fresh with like a new, I hated tofu. You know how people hate tofu? It's got such a bad rep.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, tofu's so gross. It's so soft. It's so weird. But I also didn't like scrambled eggs. I didn't like any of that stuff. So it's like, oh, now I kind of, now I like tofu. Okay. So it was really this interesting reshaping of how I viewed food and what I craved again and all of that. And and that's kind of how I started the process. So
Wow, that is amazing.
thank you. Yeah, it's been crazy.
So once she said that to you and you thought, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually commit to trying to be vegan with my food. What was the first step that you made? And like, what did that process look like of like, okay, now I have to rewire my brain. Now I have to find new ways to eat. How did you go about that?
Well, I've been living with my parents. They're my caretakers for the cancer journey. And then, of course, because of the pandemic, they stayed with me longer. And so I'm lucky that I have my parents able to support me and support my decisions. And my mom was already a vegetarian, which I know vegetarian, it's like in the South, vegetarian is really trying hard. In the South, it really is trying hard. And you have to remember, she just moved here from Florida just to take care of me. So so I've been in LA 10 years. So like, I mean, I haven't touched dairy. I was already living that lifestyle where it's like, I haven't had dairy in my coffee for 10 years. Yeah. So I was already making those little things. But my parents' support, especially them with their kind of like country cooking, having them help me switch over, and just telling them the simple things. So after we got rid of the meat, which was obviously the first thing to go, and it really helped because I wasn't craving it with the chemo and stuff. So the meat was the first to go. I was already iffy about eating red meat and even the trickery. We've talked about this, the trickery that they use, the verbiage of beef instead of cow and pork instead of pig. Like, so that was the first to go, obviously, because there's just so many anti-health benefits to those types of foods. So we quickly cut out meat, obviously. And like I said, the chemo helped me not crave meat and not want it anymore. But then, there's this real obsession about checking your protein, which is so funny because my mom's big concern was your protein levels have to be high, not just in a normal sense where people are always complaining in the soy boy kind of like you're not getting enough protein kind of thing, but legitimately like you have to reach a certain level of proteins for your blood cells to start populating. And it was fascinating because once we cut out the meat and switched over from butter and coffee creamer to almond creamer and just those little adjustments, my protein was fine. Really? And my mom every week would be like, well, we got to make sure your protein, you didn't eat a lot this week. And of course I was gaining weight and it was not a healthy, I wasn't fully healthy, obviously, but it was interesting. My protein never did go down, which is the one thing my mom was very concerned about, which, and fair enough, because we've been drilled in our heads that protein comes from meat and that's the only way you're going to get it. Yep. But it also comes from a lot of other fabulous things that I learned. And that's right. And I think having my parents, especially they're natural cooks and they do like to experiment in the kitchen. So I think that helped. And we have these dishes that we love to make that are comfort food in the South. And really replacing one or two ingredients, it's so simple. And having a best friend who is vegan definitely helped because you came over with like, oh my God, what is it called? Seitan or
Seitan.
I always want to be like Satan.
I came with that too.
Yeah.
So you just like started replacing butter with vegan butter?
Yeah,
Okay.
The very first thing we did was butter, and that's because, like I said, just Southern traditional cooking. It's just butter and lard, and of course we don't cook with lard, but so that was like the number one thing to just kind of slide on out, and then from there it was easy. Well, the hardest was getting them on board with fake cheeses and exploring that. And I get that, they're in their 50s. It's going to be a hard transition, but they are up for the challenge. So I got to give them props for that. But it was just as kind of a replacement process. And it's just replacing one. Sometimes it would just be one item for that week. Sometimes we would do, okay, let's do an overhaul and try something brand new. Let's do a Mediterranean bowl where we use, fake feta. But dairy was our baseline of getting rid of because as I said, we weren't eating meat, and it was just time to cut the fat, so to speak, you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
It
that's
is
amazing.
tough. I'm also from the South, so I understand that like butter and cheese is very much a core part of every like ingredient in those classic Southern meals. Like
Yeah.
everything that my mom made, you know, would be cheese grits and baked macaroni and cheese and
Yeah.
mashed potatoes and all of those things. But that's so great that you were able to find alternatives.
That your parents were
I
on
know that they
board.
helped
And, like,
you.
helpful about that. And that's another thing is it's too much pressure to just assume that you need to go directly vegan. So if you were like, Mom and Dad were vegan now, that's it. Because it's a huge adjustment to go
Yeah.
from butter and cheese and all that.
Your
'Cause
whole
that's what-
life.
yeah, that's what your palate is used to. So it is kind of a shock when you switch over to vegan, you know? Now,
Yeah.
like, I crave vegan cheese because that's what I eat. That's
Yeah.
what I'm adjusted to.
Yeah.
So to think like, oh, now we're vegan and that's it, it's too much pressure. So it's easier if you just like replace one or two things. Like you use vegan butter, but you use the real cheese, and you just do it like step by step
Yep.
until you're comfortable in making the transition fully. So I think you guys approach that in a very good way.
And you know, it's especially convenient that there's so many fast items that you didn't realize were vegan, especially being in the hospital. And like you can get ramen that has no animal products used. And you can get all these like quick food items and fast food, because when you are, undergoing treatment, it does feel like a lot like a permanent hangover. So you want that comfort food.
Yeah.
And so it is a little bit challenging to be like, how do I balance this desire for comfort food? For me, it was like my college days, which is like, I'm so disgusted to say, but it's like fast food, like a disgusting burger, giant French fries, and a giant Coca-Cola. That was like drilled into my brain, like this is how you cure your hangover. So a lot of my cravings at the beginning was that with chemo, because it's like this extended, hangover. And then I started to realize, well, first of all, I didn't feel good when I would eat those kind of foods, but then I was like, well, I still want fries, and I don't want them to come from McDonald's, and so it's so nice to find fast food places that have the, I'm still able to get that craving when it hits, I can pull up to a
Carl's
Burger King
Jr.
or Carl's Jr.
Yeah,
Burger
Carl's
Get my
Jr.
burger fix and not have to worry about it. So it has been, it's been really nice, and we are so lucky living in LA to have the options
Yeah.
that we have.
100%.
So it made it much easier, but yeah, it was an interesting time, and I still slip up even now. I feel I'm like, should I even be allowed to come on the Vegan View? Like, do I qualify?
No such thing as a
course.
perfect human or a perfect vegan.
No, and I do it all the time where I just assume like a bag of chips is vegan, and I buy it and I take it home and it says milk on the back, or you're like, it always happens.
Yeah,
Like
and you beat yourself up. You're always
Yeah.
like, God, I should know better. But it's like sometimes you just look at something and you don't think, why would there be milk? in eggs?
Exactly.
And you buy the bag of chips and you go home and you're like, oh, I'm so stupid. And then it's like, no, we're human, we're flawed, we make mistakes, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're consciously doing it, then I think you have some things to reevaluate.
yeah, that's the difference. It's intent.
Yeah.
What's the intention behind it?
Yeah.
But like, I will literally watch a fast food ad, a commercial, and I'll see like a chicken sandwich, and I'm like, that looks delicious. And then
Yeah,
I'm
it
like,
does.
just like go on over to Veggie Grill and get a chicken sandwich, and
so
it's
good.
like
I remember how those things tasted. They tasted good.
Yeah.
Like I can appreciate how something tastes. Like
yeah. But your brain, it gets tricked. So I think sometimes when I go into a grocery store, I just assume all the chips
Oh
are
my
vegan.
God, yeah.
Like, I'm just like, all of this is
Oh
vegan.
yeah. Or sometimes going into a restaurant and I forget I'm not at a vegan restaurant. I'm like, oh my God, all this stuff. And I'm like, oh wait. Like I went to a sushi restaurant recently and I'm like looking at the menu and
like,
I'm
"Ooh,
like,
that roll
ooh,
looks
this
good."
roll. Oh, this ain't vegan.
Yeah, you're like, I'm not at
so
Gokoku.
good.
Because like I would think like we would live in a vegan world.
I know. You start to get
It's
blissful.
shockingly easy to be vegan too. I mean, these brands
Yeah.
sneaking in their little milk products and stuff, and chips
Yeah.
and stuff, and
Yeah.
candy. What are
Yeah.
they doing?
It's almost like they have an abundance of it, and they just are like,
Yeah.
what do we do with it? Let's just sprinkle some on these potato chips. It's so
Literally.
frustrating.
I
But
would
yeah.
I would love to know the doctor that you talked to that was like, oh, you should definitely look at being more plant-based. I would assume that not every doctor is like that. So post-treat, like, I know you still go in for checkups and you're still getting treatments from time to time. Have you run into any doctors that are asking you about your diet or giving you recommendations?
Well, it's so interesting is I just had a 1 year survivorship meeting with a doctor where we discuss in detail kind of how I can stay healthy and what my life is going to look forward to post treatment and how I'm going to live life. And they brought up diet once again. And they weren't as blatant about the need for plant-based, but it was very much like, we found that chicken is full of antibiotics, so we recommend, and they're telling me this.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, okay, this is new. This is newer things that are happening in the medical field, because it was not like this. Now, I will say, I mean, I was at several hospitals, because that's the way treatment goes. And at one hospital, when I was lacking blood, I did have a doctor tell me to eat as much red meat as possible, and red meat and kale, because my protein was going low. Well, my protein was going low. As I mentioned, it was a really real thing.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of these things. The medical field is, I believe, catching up. And I think my doctors are evidence of that, because I go to I'm very thankful to go to a cutting edge facility that handles bone marrow and stem cell transplants. So I think it's also kind of the mindset is shifting in the medical community. They're understanding what is important.
It's about time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We've been
Shout out to
saying
your
this.
doctors. We need more doctors like that in the world.
Well, yeah, and I see the young people coming in for their classes and stuff, and because I go to a school, university hospital, and it's nice to see more and more young people, and it kind of gives you a hope. It reinvigorates. And my doctor who mentioned this, I should say, she is, a woman in her 30s, and she is, or maybe in her 40s, whatever, that doesn't matter. The point is it's not this outdated old practice of what, a lot of things.
Parents.
Yes, and a lot of things are just in place because they're in place.
Right.
There's no actual logic to it. And so it was really refreshing to hear on both of these occasions, including my follow-up with the 1-year survivorship doctor saying, as much vegetables as possible, try to get protein outside of meat sources. And really the calling out of the chickens was the thing, because chicken was going to be kind of like my meat to keep my protein up before I really leaned into the vegan idea.
Right.
And then we read a book about, my mom and I, who's my advocate in my health journey, and we read a book about how horrendous the chickens even are, which, it's now, once your eyes are open, there's no going back. But at the time we're like, well, why are chickens so bad? We thought cows were the worst. It's just so confusing.
Right.
But to have these doctors kind of just be like, here's why, here's the proof, here's the evidence, then it's kind of like, it makes me feel at ease. Like I'm not just going off of my gut instinct, which, because sometimes your gut doesn't always work. I had leukemia and I was trying to cure it with acupuncture. So sometimes you do have to just go to the doctors. Yeah. So it's nice that they're starting to align with, with what I believe is becoming a more, whether it's your lifestyle or a way of life or just a dietary choice, it's going to better the planet and it's going to better yourself no matter what.
Yeah.
So.
There's win-wins all around.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of animal cruelty. It's not good for you. It's not good for your body.
Yeah,
It's just so
winning,
refreshing, because
winning.
I feel like the old school mentality has always been that the only doctors that will tell you that you should, cure from within, be conscious of what you put inside your body are holistic doctors.
Yes.
Doctors that aren't necessarily taken seriously in the medical field. So to hear someone at a hospital that you went to kind of beating around the bush, not saying directly you should eat vegan, but still indirectly telling you should be eating a plant-based diet, avoid chicken, avoid meat and whatnot. It's just nice to finally hear that, because what we've always heard is that doctors just are not educated on nutrition. They don't talk about it.
They're there to prescribe and
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we are at this kind of crossroads when it comes to how people, because we have this generation of doctors who are now becoming doctors that are just a few years older than us. They're in their late 30s, they're in their 30s. And so they're bringing that young mentality onto their practice.
Yeah.
And a lot of us who are younger, we know that even if you do eat meat, you shouldn't eat meat 3 times a day. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're at least do what Paul McCartney's been preaching for years and do the meatless Monday. We all know this at the ground basics. So to have this kind of mindset, permeate the walls of a hallowed medical institution is so exciting, because it also does add levity to the holistic doctors, and it gives them credibility.
Right.
And I'm purely pro-science, because science is what saved my life, and I cannot deny it in any fashion. And I did the holistic approach for 3 months before I knew it was leukemia. So I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum, admittedly so, where I'm like, I can't go the holistic route because I don't trust it because it failed me so hard.
Yeah.
But I know there are people on the opposite spectrum of me who have been so failed by the medical system that all they have is holistic.
Yeah.
Right.
So hopefully this marriage will continue where we can have actual doctors who can prescribe medication, who can prescribe chemotherapy, who can also openly say, hey, don't eat meat. it's not good
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
You know?
And what I love about what you said with your experience was that they gave you the choice. I think that that's something that's been missing in the medical field for a long time, is that doctors just prescribe you what they think is right and what they've been told is right, and that's it. And they are lacking that holistic approach of like, here are a couple options for you. What do you feel is going to work best for you?
Yeah. Oh my God.
I've never been given that option with any of my health issues in the past. Like they've always just been like, take this antibiotic.
Like,
here's this. Yeah.
I'm like, wait, can you tell me? Like, is there something I should be doing wrong? What triggered this? Like, I want to know more information. Like,
Right.
Well, let me tell you, when it's a bigger diagnosis, they will give you that information. And, then the choice is like, okay, so you can either die and not do chemo, or you can do the chemo, or you can do the chemo and the transplant. So the bigger the diagnosis, the more in-depth they get.
Right.
But I agree. They need to be like that from, every aspect.
Yeah.
Because it's
from
all
the moment
important.
you walk in.
Yeah.
It's all important.
Exactly. And it's so frustrating. Like the last time I went to the doctor, I don't remember what it was, but I remember I was like, well, what caused this? Like, how can I fix this? Like, and she was like, it just happens sometimes. And she prescribed me a pill. And I was like, but I want to know if I'm doing something that would cause an issue that would like, I can prevent it, or can you check for allergies? Can you do something more than just give me a prescription for a pill?
Yeah.
You know, it's really frustrating sometimes.
I've had one doctor in my whole life, and I still have her, where she was like, hey, here are your options. And some of them were medicine and some of them were herbal. And I'm like, for the first time in my life, I feel like someone listened to me and like cared and like gave me options. And I feel like that feeling is so good coming from a medical professional.
Yeah.
Because it's like we rely on them in a lot of ways, you know?
Yeah, we do.
absolutely.
Having someone finally acknowledge the connection between what you put into your body, instead of just like,
Yeah.
well, it's okay, this can fix it, so it doesn't really matter, like, what you put into your body. And it's like, no, it does matter.
They all matter.
They all
It
matter.
all kind of works together.
They all of it's important.
I would love to hear about your experience. So you said that you were trying to fix things holistically before with like acupuncture and stuff like that. I would love to hear more about that, because I think there's a lot of vegans out there that are very, anti-medicine, anti-science, because, like you said, some people may have had bad experiences, or just the mentality that like, oh, we eat really healthy, so we can't have health issues,
Right.
which sometimes medicine and medical intervention is necessary.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear about like your journey with that and what led you to seek alternatives.
So, I mean, I wanted to approach holistically at first because I was suffering from just weird symptoms, migraines, stomach aches, to the point that I was wanting to seek help, but not to the point where I was going to the hospital regularly yet. I got sicker and sicker to the point where I would go to the emergency room about once a week, and I was like, this is not a normal way to live. So then I would start explore like IV drips, where they come to your house and feed you up with all the nutrients you need. And then it was really crazy because a month before my diagnosis, I went to a couple of different acupuncturists. I went to some really old school, traditional ones. I went to a little bit more modern ones, whatever. And I remember asking a guy, being like, well, I'm really afraid it's cancer. And I remember I'm a self-diagnosed hypochondriac, so I think everything's cancer or some STD that I caught, or just some horrible thing that's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, WebMD doesn't help that.
Yeah, and it does
Definitely
not
not.
help. So I told him, I was like, what do I have? And he's like, let me look at your tongue. And he was like, no cancer at all. We just got to clear out your gut a little bit. And he just started pinpointing me and all this stuff. And then I was like, okay, feeling confident now. And of course, 4 short weeks later, I got my cancer diagnosis. So it just put a lot, like I already said, I have a distrust in that holistic approach. Not a distrust, but it just needs to be partnered with a little bit more of, I would have loved to have a medical opinion on site. I can't say it enough. I wish we could marry the two.
Yeah.
If we could blend this two, if we could have someone who could check my CBC levels while I'm getting acupuncture and say, because your blood numbers, if you're so concerned about the health and your body being healthy, you're going to want to know your blood numbers.
Yeah.
It goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
So why not do a CBC panel when you're getting your acupuncture? There's a way to marry the two. I'm not the one to do it. I'm still recovering and fighting it, and I love my hospital and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a stressful time because I wanted so badly to find a way to fix myself that wasn't me checking into the hospital again. And
I'm starting to think that maybe there's a little bit, this is just a theory, that I'm gathering, maybe there's a little bit of resentment from both sides, and that's why they're so against each other, rather than thinking like this holistic doctor could have checked you out and been like, if this is something that you're worried about, you should absolutely go get your blood tested, and not being against it and trying to claim that they can cure you with the holistic approach.
Right.
Or just flat out saying, oh no, you definitely don't have cancer because I looked at your tongue.
Certainly.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And then I had leukemia.
That just sounds like a
Because what if you
bad
just
doctor.
kept going to acupuncture? Like,
I know.
I'm just
Yeah. And then, the other side of the doctors who will only prescribe you medicine not being able to acknowledge the other side and be like, well, maybe this can help you also. You should look into that. It's like, can you guys just work together as a
get
team?
married?
Yeah, like, come on. Both are important.
Both are so important.
Just work together instead of being against each other.
So how do you feel?
I'm feeling good. I mean,
You look good.
We just hit the 1 year mark, right?
yeah, well, it's been 2 years since my diagnosis and 1 year since my transplant and remission.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been quite the journey, and it's gonna keep going. And good days and bad days.
So how are you feeling about your vegan journey thus far?
I feel so good about my vegan journey. I am ready to just keep going, and I'm learning more and more. I'm learning from your channel and from y'all, like what I can, like, especially the stuff that you didn't know was vegan is so helpful. And I find a lot of support within the vegan community, and I really like that, and I think that it's a really cool thing. I've had a lot of support in the cancer community and the LGBTQ community, and so I'm so excited to be a part of the vegan community now. And the support it offers to really fine-tune a lifestyle that's ethical for every living thing. And after going through such suffering, I don't want anyone to suffer, anyone or anything to suffer, so I think this is just the beginning for me. So
Jared, we are so happy for you. We're so happy that you're here, that
Yes.
you're healthy, that you're thriving, that you look great.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us
Yeah,
today.
thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is going to inspire a lot of people.
Yeah. You guys definitely have to check out his podcast as well. It's one of my favorites. I literally listen to it all the time. Like, if I'm in the car, I'm most likely listening to Back on Air.
I mean, I know every story and everything that he talks about, and I still listen to it in my car, and I'm so entertained by him.
Yeah,
so you
it's
have
amazing.
To listen.
Well, thank you. Thank you for
you.
that plug.
Guys, please comment below. Let us know how veganism has maybe helped you in a difficult time in your life. Like, comment, subscribe.
Join our Facebook page.
I always forget about the Facebook page.
Maybe we'll have Jared on another episode. Would you like
Yeah.
to come back?
Yeah.
We would love you.
We would love to have you come back.
We'll do something fun.
Stay tuned. All right, we'll see you guys next week for another episode.
Bye!